Do you really know what happened on October 7th? You think you do, but believe me, you don't. You've been lied to. We all have.
So that opening really grabbed my attention and I watched the full video. Now, for full transparency, this is not the first time I've watched this video. This will be the second time. The first time someone forwarded this video to me, and that hook, that opening really grabbed my attention and I watched the full video. And yeah, this will be the second time I watch this, and without further ado, let's watch.
Do you really know what happened on October 7th? You think you do, but believe me, you don't. You've been lied to. We all have.
Okay, so that's interesting start, right? And when I watched this, I was wondering, okay, what is it that we have been lied to? Because it is depicted as, you know, the attack from Hamas to Israel. Basically, everyone sees it as such. Of course, the connotation, the implication, the label used, whether it is terrorist attack, etc., that differ between different groups, right? Whether it's justified, it is seen as the starting point of the whole episode. Is it a reaction to what have been happening for decades, etc., right? Those differ. So I was wondering, okay, what aspect of it is it the connotation or it's what actually happened? So that's why I'm interested to see what this guy have to say about this, right? Anyway.
Do you really know what happened on October 7th? You think you do, but believe me, you don't. You've been lied to. We all have. The Zionist media has presented this event to the world as a Holocaust against innocent civilians. But the story couldn't be more different. The Zionists have been lying because they are terrified of what actually happened. You see, October 7th is one of the biggest ongoing cover-ups in recent memory. A grand lie to distract you from the truth. And it's been working. People have either bought into the atrocity propaganda lies or they're too busy trying to disprove it. Palestinians didn't behead babies, didn't put babies in ovens, didn't rape women, they didn't torture civilians. So many of us.
Okay, up till this point, I thought, okay, maybe what he's referring to is all those news, quote unquote news, that comes out from you know, the attack, and about even I think Biden says that he had saw pictures of beheaded babies and then have to retract it, right? So is it focusing on that, right? Allegation of rape, beheading babies, etc. Those of course have been shown to be lies. My mind shifted to that. Oh, okay, this one to expose that. Little did I know that it is actually about something else entirely. Let's watch it together.
Busy trying to disprove it. Palestinians didn't behead babies, didn't put babies in ovens, didn't rape women, they didn't torture civilians. So many of us have been so focused on what didn't happen on October 7th. What we need to do now is focus on what did happen, because Israel is terrified of the truth. And I'll let you in on a little secret. The truth that I'm about to reveal to you is what will destroy the Zionist regime, that will free Palestine. Yes, it's that serious. By the end of this video.
So at that point, I was wondering, okay, wait, it cannot be about what I was wondering, because just refuting those allegations to be lies, right, will not really end Israel. So what is he talking about, right? So this is why I'm still watching until the end, because even though I thought, oh, he's talking about that one, and I have seen many videos that actually already refute all those allegations, but then he says that no, this is about something that will end Israel. So what is it?
You will understand why. Now, let's get to it. What really happened on October 7th? And why has Israel tried to cover it up? The truth is that on October 7th, resistance fighters from Gaza carried out a daring military operation against a juggernaut, and they succeeded. Israel, in its hubris, had begun to believe that the Palestinian movement was uninterested in armed resistance. From within the confines of their concentration camps, underdogs from Gaza had to avoid detection from constant surveillance by satellites, informants, collaborators, motion detection and seismic sensors, and 24/7 monitoring by 2G phone networks, border cameras, and overhead drones. They undermined Israel's security apparatus by planning details on pen and paper, feeding false information to informants and leveraged Israeli arrogance and complacency to plan and operate relatively undetected. In the early hours of October 7th, a blitz of over 2,200 rockets were fired at the Iron Dome missile defense system. But this was only truly meant to provide the cover needed to fly drones over the $1 billion Iron Wall and destroy the remote-controlled machine gun turrets and communication towers. They rammed through the first layer of defense and then created over 20 separate breach points through the main Iron Wall. Their immediate objectives: take out important nearby command and control military sites and do so as quickly as possible before the Israelis could respond. So they split into small divisions and raced to their targets. Speedboats raced across the ocean and onto the beaches of Zakim, while paragliders flew over the wall and landed in various areas. Guys on beat-up motorcycles and pickup trucks used homemade anti-tank missiles to take out $3 million Merkava tanks and $20 million Apache helicopters. They conquered Re'im military base, an important communications and drone surveillance headquarters, killing or capturing all the soldiers inside before destroying the server rooms. According to Scott Ritter, Hamas struck the headquarters of the Gaza division, the local intelligence hub, and other major command and control facilities with brutal precision, turning what should have been a 5-minute response time into many hours, more than enough time for Hamas to carry out one of its primary objectives, the taking of hostages, to use as exchange for the near 5,000 men, women, and children rotting in Israeli administrative detention centers, returning to Gaza with more than 230 Israeli soldiers and civilians. The result was a complete rout.
Now, until this point, I think all of us have heard of this, right? For me, when I heard about the sea operation, I didn't realize on that. I know about they're going through the breach, the fence, right? But the sea one, I'm not sure. Maybe I haven't watched enough. I wasn't aware of that. That's number one. Number two, I know of the 100 of rockets. Is it the 1,000 of rockets? One discussion that I have heard before is to go through the Iron Dome. They cannot overcome the Iron Dome except by the sheer number to let some of it pass through. But I didn't know that it is actually just to decoy, to actually neutralize the system. So that's number two. Number three, we have known about the objective of taking or capturing hostages. And I remember one discussion, I think is it by the comedian, the Egyptian comedian, Basim, right? He said that based on track record, the only moment when Israel gives some land back, the only moment when they give back some of the land that they have taken, for example, they move out from Gaza, is when they cannot handle it anymore, right? And then they retreat. So the lesson learned from that is the only moment Israel will actually concede something is never from negotiation, never from any peace talk. It's always from this kind of means. Hence, the only way possible that the Palestinian can actually demand the release of the Palestinians that Israel have been taking into their prison is having something to swap with, right? So that's quite an interesting perspective that is as a result of Israel's policy in the first place, right? Because if you learn from history, you will not repeat the same mistake. And the mistake of assuming Israel will ever give anything at all by peace negotiation, if you do not learn from that mistake, you are just a fool and a stupid person, I guess, right? Because you do not learn from history, from previous mistake. Hence, the only way from history to have any leverage to demand something that Israel will actually concede is to have someone taken to be swapped with. So that's quite interesting perspective that I think based on history, can you fault them to resort to that strategy, because that's the only moment in history where Israel will ever concede anything.
more than 230 Israeli soldiers and civilians. The result was a complete rout of local Israeli military forces. For hours, the Israelis were completely in the dark, confused as to where the attack was even coming from. Thousands of rockets were in the air, dozens of bases and military settlements, aka kibbutz, were captured, and multiple helicopters.
Now,
More than
Wait.
4 hours, the Israelis were completely in the dark, confused as to where the attack was even coming from. Thousands of rockets were in the air, dozens of bases and military settlements, aka kibbutz, were
so military settlement, aka kibbutz, right? So when they attack many kibbutz or military settlement, right? Because I have watched earlier, very early in this whole episode, where the Hamas spokesperson says we never attack civilian, and when the counterpart says no, the one that died, they are in plain clothes, right? In civilian clothes. But from Hamas perspective, they say that because their perspective is that is military settlement. It's not civilian. It's military, even though the military have families, etc. Right? But it is a military settlement. Hence, when they say adult there, the first assumption is that this is part of the military. So that is interesting perspective from both sides and from the third party observer, because most of those that died is not in military uniform, because we will see they are not yet in the military uniform. They are just waking up, etc. Right? Because the attack is at that point of time. But the first assumption is those are military because it is in a military compound.
captured, and multiple helicopters and tanks were destroyed. The attack came so hard and so fast that many IDF soldiers were still in their pajamas as the resistance fighters entered the barracks. How could these half-starved and besieged fighters have the gall to escape their prison and carry out an attack like this? No one in Israel could have imagined it, let alone expected. Desperate to respond, the Israelis began to implement scorched earth tactics. Their helicopters began firing Hellfire missiles and machine gun rounds indiscriminately at vehicles and people running in the fields. Tanks rolled through the kibbutz and main roads and shelled houses as ground troops exchanged fire with militants. This led to the deaths of many civilians. It was the most humiliating defeat in Israel's history and has created an internal political crisis that could break the Israeli government for good. Netanyahu, desperate to hold on to power, is exchanging accusations with the military and intelligence apparatus, as neither want to take responsibility for the humiliating defeat. Tens of thousands of Israeli protesters are in the streets demanding that Israel agree to a hostage swap with the Palestinians in order to save their family members. And the crisis is external as well. The Palestinians have reawakened.
Now, because we have seen several prisoners released, right? Including from Hamas several times. And I remember when the first batch, and they say that this is what they have offered from the very beginning, because the primary objective is to take someone and then to swap, so that the Israeli will release the women and children in the prison, right? So interesting shift between Israel's stance not to want to negotiate to suddenly currently with the temporary truce, right?
A spirit of resistance in the face of an ongoing military occupation.
Resistance has proven its value. This is one of the chants we've been hearing from Palestinians here who have been protesting in support of the prisoners exchange deal.
The Israelis.
So that's the interesting point, right? Resistance have proven to have shown its value, right? Because so long before this, you know, the lost hope, so to speak, and suddenly the hope arises or have risen recently.
Have been protesting in support of the prisoners exchange deal.
The Israelis thought they could expand the illegal occupation, steal more land, build more settlements, erect more walls, arrest more children, increase surveillance, siege, starve, and bomb Gaza to hell, and desecrate the holy Al-Aqsa Mosque without any blowback or consequences. The Israelis implemented a policy of brutality and deterrence instead of one of peace, justice, and diplomacy. diplomacy, and it worked for a time. Palestinians had become complacent with the status quo, and the Muslim world was betraying the Palestinian cause and normalizing with Israel. But Hamas undermined all.
Yeah, that's one factor that I'm not sure how many people that haven't been following the what is going on, whether they factor that in, because we know that the normalization is taking place with many Arab countries building strong bonds with Israel, right? And that is seen to be something that shouldn't happen, and if let to happen, then so it has to happen, meaning the reaction has to happen. Yeah.
And the Muslim world was betraying the Palestinian cause and normalizing with Israel. But Hamas undermined all of this with their bold act of resistance on October 7th. The illusion of Israeli power has now been shattered. The veil has been lifted.
Power resides where men believe it resides. It's a trick, a shadow on the wall.
On October 7th, they exposed Israel's power for what it is, a trick, a shadow on the wall. And this terrifies Israel because despite all their wealth, power, and resources, they cannot defeat an opponent that won't go down. The Israelis were shocked on October 7th because they thought the fight was over. After 75 years of brutality, 75 years of occupation, of violence, they thought they had won. They thought the leadership of the Palestinian resistance had been cowed into submission. For all their wall.
Now, about the status quo, and the Palestinians have accepted the status quo. I think it is interesting to note that what is happening in Gaza and in West Bank is very different. What have been going on throughout, right? Of course, we know Gaza is under blockade. So that's one thing. That is a terrible thing that is going on. However, in West Bank, the occupation is even more real in the sense that even within, right? So we know that in Gaza, right, nothing comes in or out. They are constantly under surveillance. Water, electricity is under control, etc. Right? But in West Bank, even to go in short distances, that is even you have the checkpoints, etc. Right? So I think the fighting willpower in the West Bank is even more diminished because of that reality. And it is interesting to note that many of the captives that the Palestinians have been captured by Israel and put in prison every single week, every single month, every single year, etc. For all that we know, I think it's mostly in the West Bank. And when Gaza or Hamas, right, or Al-Qassam brigade take those captives to exchange, many of those who are being released is in the West Bank, right? Meaning they're releasing the Israelis from Gaza, right? But the Palestinians that have been put in jail, in prison, is many is from the West Bank, right? So it is quite interesting dynamic to see what will happen in West Bank when they see that, what they have done from there, right? Because they're separated quite far, right, from Gaza. What they have done there actually bear fruit over here, right? So I'm interested to see where this goes, because I think the land, the most of the issue with the continuous increasing in settlements, etc., is in the West Bank, right? So what will happen there based on this episode?
Of the Palestinian resistance had been cowed into submission. For all their walls, drones, bombs, sensors, radars, cameras, bullets, rockets, and jets, the Palestinian will to resist persists. It always has, and it always will. As Omar Mukhtar, the legendary resistance fighter, said, it's win or die. It's victory or martyrdom. This is a spirit that has reawakened in the Palestinians and their diaspora on October 7th. And this is why the Israelis are terrified.
There was that ant that stood up to me.
Yeah, but we can forget about him.
Yeah, it was just one ant. One ant.
Yeah, you're right. It's just one ant.
Yeah, boss, they're puny.
Puny? Say, let's pretend this grain is a puny little ant.
Did that hurt?
Nope.
Well, how about this one? Are you kidding? How about this?
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line.
This is why they have responded with a disgusting level of collective punishment. When the Romans wanted to quell the gladiator rebellion, they crucified over 6,000 slaves and lined their bodies up along the Appian Way. For 125 miles from Capua to Rome, travelers would see nothing but crucified bodies. Israel's trying to do the same, but with bombs instead of crucifixions. They want to make an example out of Palestinian resistance. They're trying to show the Palestinians in the West Bank that resistance will be met with gross forms of violence. And they want their Arab and Muslim neighbors to know that they will level their cities like they are leveling Gaza. But this is not a display of strength, quite the opposite. It's a display of weakness. They are so desperate to maintain the illusion, the trick, the shadow on the wall, that they are destroying their reputation and exposing themselves in front of the entire world. And while you may think that Israel enjoys full Western support, there is a limit to what the world will accept. All over the world, millions of people are marching. The United States just witnessed its largest ever Palestine demonstration. People of all races and class joined together to denounce the genocide of Gaza and call for the liberation of Palestine. Western political leaders are slowly changing their tune, calling for humanitarian pauses and trying to negotiate a long-term ceasefire. And Muslim leaders all over the world are feeling the pressure as well. The Indonesian president and Malaysian prime minister condemned the Israeli attack right to the face of Joe Biden. The King of Jordan, who has historically been soft in his condemnation, is talking about war. And Turkey's rhetoric has been increasingly openly hostile to Israel and its Western supporters. This isn't enough, but it is evidence that Palestinian resistance is working. It is evidence that your voices are being heard, your demonstrations are being watched, your social media activity is working. And Israel is terrified. This is why they are lying about what occurred on October 7th. They do not want Palestinian resistance, whether it's violent or peaceful, to be viewed as legitimate or justified. They don't want it to be seen as effectual. They do not want their illusion of power to be shattered. So they have resorted to committing atrocities and spreading atrocity propaganda lies. They have to make what Hamas did on October 7th dirty. They need to cover up that their military was completely routed in a military raid in order to maintain this perception of strength and power. But the truth is, they are losing support from the populations of the West, and their economy is hemorrhaging money. They are losing over $600 million a week. Their government hangs on by a thread, and this weakness comes at a time when there is already tremendous pressure on their biggest ally, the United States. This cannot last forever. The clock is ticking. The protests are mounting. Netanyahu's days are numbered. Biden and the Democrats are facing re-election. The dollar is inflating. The Ukraine war is failing. The US empire is in decline, and China, Russia, Turkey, Saudi, and Iran are rising. The subjugation of the Palestinian people isn't sustainable. Their system is breaking, and together we can break it. This is the opportunity. This is the moment to seize upon. Pressure must be applied everywhere, from the West Bank of Palestine to the streets of Turkey, Jordan, Indonesia, and the West. The politicians and the media will try to move on from this issue, but we cannot allow them to do so. The Israelis, in all their arrogance, are buying us more time. They are insisting on invading southern Gaza, which gives us the opportunity opportunity to organize and resist before it's too late. We must not only continue the protests, we must escalate them. There isn't a single pressure point. There are pressure points all over the world that lead directly to the White House. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing in those areas, do more of it non-stop. You see, we don't just want a pause in the fighting. We want a pause in all of society until the issue is addressed. This can be accomplished by sustained peaceful protests in the heart of your cities. We must force this issue until the world pressures Israel to finally end their occupation.
Let this be a lesson to all you ants. Ideas are very dangerous things.
You are mindless, soil-shoving losers! Put on this earth to serve us!
You're wrong, Hopper. Ants are not meant to serve grasshoppers. I've seen these ants do great things. And year after year, they somehow manage to pick food for themselves and you. So who is the weaker species? Ants don't serve grasshoppers. It's you who need us. We're a lot stronger than you say we are. And you know it, don't you?
Gaza was the little ant that stood up. We cannot allow them to fight alone. This is not a call for violence. It is a call for mass civil unrest and protest all over the world. We must spread the word and let everyone know their system is breaking. It's been breaking for decades. This is the moment. We must apply pressure until we break it. If they wish to enslave the Palestinians, we must make them fight for it. And if we wish for Palestine to be free, we must fight for them. So let's keep fighting and see who taps out first.
Right. So yeah, that's the video. So I'm interested to know if you have watched this video before and what do you think about it. I don't have much to add from this particular narrative. Of course, what happened on October 7th is after a long aspiration and planning. That's number one. Number two, building up strength within the very limited opportunity that they have, right? Meaning we know the reality of under blockade over decades. And the only reason how that can be is because the optimism is there. It never faded away. It's just that step by step, little by little, the building of strength in terms of quality, in terms of number, in terms of optimism, etc. It takes a long time to build that up to a level when you can actually have enough to go to escalate and still withstand what comes afterwards. We know what will happen, what have happened after October 7, and what will continue to happen, right? We know, but they are ready for it, right? So that's quite interesting perspective, and that only comes with optimism that never faded away, right? And I'm interested to see how that triggered what happened in the West Bank. So that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. See you next time.